Welcome to A Table in a Tavern, your community RPG podcast. Every episode, we'll explore the depths of immersive storytelling, character creation, and mechanics that make TTRPGs so captivating. Whether you're a dungeon master, a player, or just a curious listener, there's a seat for you at our table. So grab your ale, pull up a chair, and let's embark on this journey together. Welcome to the Tavern. Hello everybody, once again, we're back. I am GM Keegan, and as always, DM Knock is with me. Today's special guest is a longtime player, Ken. He is dipping his toes after several years into the GM space and is working on building out the world. Today's subject, the seeds of world building. What seeds have you planted and begun, Ken?
The most foundational one for me, anytime I tend to start world building, is working with a map. The visualization of having how the world is organized is instrumental to me.
Oh, that's actually interesting because I do not start with a map. I start with uh, political, like who are the major players in this world. Keegan, have you made your own world? What do you start with?
I was going to let everybody go because I'm evidently a psychopath. I talk to everybody else and ask, how do you logistically organize your games and build these things out? And I always start with, what is cool? What cool thing do I want to do? What's the cool thing? And it's so bizarre because that's where I start. What's the cool thing?
So you are like, you start with the micro. Ken starts with the macro, and I'm somewhere in between. This is interesting.
Okay, so we're gonna go back to actually you, Doc. Since you're the in between, tell us a little bit more about like what where are your seeds that start growing?
Yeah. So, all right. So the first thing that I really do is I kind of narrow down political powers. So I'll go, okay, I want a kingdom with this sort of theme, or a territory with this sort of, like aspect to it. And then I don't go too deep into history with it yet. I just kind of build like the um, recent events, maybe the last 10, 15 years kind of thing. But the whole point that I'm trying to do when I start world building is, why are my players in this kingdom? What are they doing here, and what is their next objective if there is one? And then after that, I kind of go, okay, well, if they're trying to escape, let me build. That's where I switch to the map mode, and I start building those natural boundaries and start making challenges. But if I'm also going, it's funny that you say that, because now at that point, I'm going, okay, well, what are they doing? What's that cool? What's that um, that item or that quest, or that one thing that they have to get? Like, I know it's the carrot on a stick for the characters. So I'll switch between those two, but I always start with, give me that small uh, kind of that small history, just the last recent decade or so, and then build from there.
So I'm gonna reserve mine again. Ken, tell us something about the macro, the big stuff that you start with.
Well, I do want to say just briefly that what you both have mentioned, the cool factor, is something that does come in early, but I tend to, like I was saying, making things up with the map first so that then I can do the polities and stuff like that. The politics, the histories of this world and so on and so forth. Uh, I like to build a vibrant, breathing world where there's been a war that was had 1,000 years ago between these two guys is why we have these three countries and so on and so forth.
I got a question real quick, because I do hear this a lot. They build the map out, like way of doing stuff. So I'm kind of curious, Ken. Uh, is there something like particular? Do you just pick like a small region, or you're like, I want to take over something the size of what a modern day country would look like, or do you jump all the way to the continental level and just jump on? Do you like doodle this on paper? Like, what is it looking like? Because it almost seems too much in my mind, but I also can't see how your mind works. So, like, where do you actually start? What level?
I start with continents. It might not be the simple way to do it, but uh, having it done that way allowed me to better visualize where I wanted to put certain cool things, certain races, certain events, and stuff like that.
So, do you actually like go, okay, now the players get dropped in because they're going to touch all these parts, or do you do that just purely so you understand your own history?
It's for my own sake, I would say the bulk of the time. Uh, a lot of my world building is for my own sake, so I have an understanding so that I actually get around to writing this narrative, when I actually get to writing the story for the players, I have, shall we say, just cause for the things I'm doing.
Okay, no, that makes sense. um where I'm at, I tend to, when I said I think of what's cool to do, i I can have a game where I'm like, I want them to stop something huge from coming in and wiping them all out. Okay, that sounds cool. I want them to fight the this this creature or an army that's almost like a natural disaster more than an entity that they can actually defeat. So in my head, that's it. That's the roadmap. Or it could be really small and be they are on a journey from here to there because I want just nothing but despair and heartache and every negative and tumultuous emotion of them struggling as players and humans because they just are moving through a world of desperation. And I'm like, okay, I want my players to cry because that's how bad it hopefully will be. So I just start with an emotion that I want to experience and I want them to experience. And then I start to build. I would say that's my first seed. My first seed is what's the emotion that I want them to feel during this
Okay.
campaign.
Yeah, so you get the carrot on the stick. So you're building that the MacGuffin item or that quest, that feeling. That's what you're aiming for, and then you build around that.
Yeah, I tend to try to chase the emotional high in every game, no matter what the campaign is, no matter what the style or theme is. What's the high? What's the emotional high? And if that's like that could be heroes and glory, that's fine. But how do you do that? Or it could be in a world that's post-apocalypse and desperation. Well, then how do I get the
So
emotional high of desperation?
yeah, yeah, no, I get that. I truly do. And as someone that's in between you guys with this, now I have a question, and that's, do you think the other side of it? So if you focus on the micro, do you think the macro suffers from that? And then same thing. I actually want to start with Ken on this. If you are focusing on the macro, right, the big world, the actually literally building the world map, do you think the micro suffers because you're putting so much focus on a big wide area instead of focusing on what the players are going to do first?
I would definitely have to say that the micro suffers, with the caveat that I do get around to some of the micro stuff, but I have an ADHD brain, man. It's hard for me to forecast what exactly the players are going to do without, committing to a plot train and stuff like that, which that's a whole other kettle of fish we could talk about. Um,
All right, and then what about you, Keegan? Do you think because you focus so much on the intact feeling, that micro level, do you think that your overall world building suffers from that?
Early on, I started out and came in building out. Well, I was still interested in it, building out the entire world. And I have come after 30 years realizing what is it do I really like? And it's the emotion, immersion, being in character. These are the things I love. So, how do I reinforce that? So, starting on the micro matters the most. And then, as I build out from this, the seed grows into a large tree, and the tree goes into, well, how do I reinforce it to larger towns or to grander quests? Or if it's a sandbox, how do I have these pressures of the world ratcheted up and that are just moving autonomously to reinforce that theme? Because I've learned through many mistakes of players, uh, real they get lost in my drive to find the high because I wasn't organized. And so I've had to learn to be like, okay, they did suffer early on. How do I correct that? And it took a couple decades to eventually correct it to the point where the macro is locked in, but it's like building blocks. Every block on top of it, all the way out to the continental level, is reinforcing the same emotional theme no matter what happens. So I would say early on, yes, it definitely suffered because I was too hyper focused. And through many trial and error and players saying how bad things were, they didn't say it, but I definitely felt it. And learned that I needed to reinforce it, and it's okay to spend more time on that macro level.
Man, I actually love that too, because how else are you going to evolve when you're creating this story, this immersive world for your players? If, like you said, if you don't recognize that, you're just going to keep doing it. And at some point, you have to kind of go, all right, well, maybe I'm not a good GM, or maybe I'm not a good story writer, or and that's fine. Just practice a little bit more, or take that feedback and run with it.
I would say real quick, the best feedback I've ever had was,
Yeah.
I don't know what we're doing. And this is for us supposedly like a story-driven adventure. And if somebody in an adventure says, I just don't know what we're doing, that's a very player response, not a character response. And
Yeah.
eats at my soul to this day, no matter how many years go by. That is eats at my soul. Eats at my soul. Every time I go, oh God, please never hear those dreaded words again.
So Keegan, have you been building the same world over these 30 years that you've been talking? Or have you fashioned other, like, different worlds?
I would say yes and no. The yes is purely just for me, the GM, that nobody will know that every single campaign I've ever made is in the exact same universe. And
Okay.
so that's pure me. Nobody will ever understand or touch on how it's connected. But that's just it's like self-indulgent thing. That's just, I like doing that. Everything is in the same universe, no matter what the setting is. But no, I will do fresh because I always have new ideas. I'm like, it's a new idea. It's different. It might be semi, like I've run several in the same post-apocalypse world, but it's like an air quote same place.
Yeah.
It's never the same location, so I always have something different. And I might purely just for inspiration reasons say they're relatively connected, but I never give like actual timelines to these because I want these players to have absolute control with their characters and to control the destiny of this world that we're playing. And I don't want it to be established of I have to force it into the timeline of the rest of the campaigns I've done in this world.
Yeah, I get you.
So I go, yeah, it's like a loose thing, but they probably don't know and they don't care. That's fine. And we'll just move on because I really want them to have agency to the nth degree to radically change everything. And if it does, that's cool. I might take a portion of it next time, but it's fine. The continuity ends with the campaign.
Gotcha. Okay, so you have created many worlds, same universe.
Pretty much.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Where Ken is the opposite. He's been working 20 years on
wow.
the same
23
world.
years, 24 years now. Yes, the same little world. It's gone from just a doodling I did in the middle of class one day. Had an idea for a villain. Uh, the primary villain, as you know, Nock, is a lich. But back in the day of 3.5, it was meant to be a Elitharid Alhoun, a super mind flayer lich. Um, that was chosen purely because that's what was presented to me in 3.5. Over the years, I've decided to move away from established systems and start working on something of my own.
And then here we are, would you say 24 years later?
24 years later, baby, and it's
And
still growing.
yep. And there's always Ken's always coming to me with just lore questions like, "Hey, does this sound good? Is this interesting?" Um, and then like the nuances of this. I know we're branching a little bit away from the seeds of world building, but just to give a hint, Keegan, of what Ken does, I watched him study tectonic plates for his world.
And that's just one small thing. That was just for the physical geography. I also have I've shown you the maps of like ocean currents and stuff like that as well. The politics of the year 79 AD or whatever, the politics of the here and now. Just I have textbooks from college still. I took physical geography so I'd be able to make maps better. I have picture books of geological formations so that I better understand how to put them onto paper.
Yeah, the same map, but several maps of the same map. It's been interesting.
Well,
Now
I would actually call these seeds because as he's talking,
yeah,
we're building or Ken's building lore. He is creating, most commonly known, the big bad evil guy, or perhaps just one of several. He's talking about conflicts, past and current ones. The geography, you can have a general layout, and you could be a little crazy. and be like, I want the ocean currents and understand how tectonic plates and everything shifts. But it's still the fact that you still have geography on the mind, very important. And then the politics of how these moving shakers are changing the world socially. And then, of course, I think one of the third or fourth seed that I put down is maps. Having a general map, a general layout, because that's to me really putting. I think that's one of the biggest seeds because you can watch the garden grow once you have a map. Because you have a map and you're dropping all these little things in it, and then as they kind of bump up to next to each other, you can kind of see where that seedling has grown and started to sprout all sorts of conflicts or changes the structure or layout, geographical layout or even political layout of an area. Why that's really cool to put a town on the ocean because you wanted a coastal one, but then later on you added another seedling of but there's conflicts going on between these factions or tribes. Okay, well now that changes what's going on and impacting that little coastal town and starts developing. So you could like see the sproutlings kind of run into each other until slowly is growing into a great forest. So I think the things Ken's mentioned are amazing and perfect seedlings.
Well, thank you kindly.
Now, implementing them over 24 years, I think that's a different topic, but
Yeah,
I think the ideas are
it's
great.
been a journey. It's been definitely been a journey for me with this little world. It's gone up on a shelf, been dug back out, been ignored for a while, but I've never really stopped with it for a long time. It's just had to put a pin in it because of X, Y, or Z thing.
Mr. In Between, where are you landing with your halfway birth seeds here?
yeah. As I mentioned, I usually start at the political level. Um, and minor history. So I'll start off with, okay, what do I with the intrigue instead of the carrot on the stick or instead of the world as a whole.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I usually go with, all right, who is against my players? As in who? So organizations, kingdoms, uh, towns, territories, whatever it happens to be. And from there, I build upwards. So I'll go, okay, well, I have these are their direct rivals, or maybe this kingdom just doesn't like what our players are about, and so I'll flesh out the kingdom a little bit, and then I go, okay, well, that's one. Where are the players going to go if they don't like this? Well, they're going to go to the kingdom in the north or to the east. Okay, well, let me build them out. And that's what I do, is just get the general sense of what they're going to be walking into, kind of a vibe check, I guess, with each of those areas. And then from there, I start building a small backlog of history, and then I start filling it with the MacGuffins or the quests or the feelings that, like, why are the whys, I guess, why are they here, what are they doing in that area. So I do plan a lot out. I just I think I actually visit the micro last. So
So, when you say political, just to kind of reiterate, do you mean
mhm.
what is the central social conflict?
Yeah, so um and it really depends on where I'm starting the campaign at. A lot of people starts it in a tavern. Hey, okay, that's fine. Let's take that. So this tavern is in a city or a town, right? What's that town's disposition towards my players? And then what is the government style that's over it? Is it a monarchy? Is there a king that likes our players or dislikes them? Uh, then I kind of flesh out that city, right? Whatever that kingdom is, and then I go outwards from there. Um, so I guess it'd be better to say that I flesh out the capital city if I'm talking about map making and intrigue, and then I'll go into the kingdom mode, and then I'll branch out into the kind of the world view.
What I'm kind of getting from all this is, should be obvious to most people, is that everybody organizes himself differently. So you can have like a whole bag of seeds of world building. Which one you pick out first, it really comes down to your own mind and your own thinking, and what. Because in the end, we do plant all of them.
Right,
I don't think
right.
any.
Right.
I don't think any gym wouldn't say that they don't do that. So once we plant it, it really just comes down to, okay, but I want this first. I'm going emotional tone. Okay, well, that's still in the bag. You guys are going to pick that out eventually. Or I want to start with this huge geographical location so I can understand it and then fill it. That's fine. Eventually, somebody else that's another seed in the bag. What's the emotional? Not emotional. The social or the sounds like conflict is the very first thing you pick.
Yeah,
Right?
yep. I do overall conflict. Yeah.
Okay. Always social, or does that also include the dragon type of conflict, or is it always just whatever? What's the social conflict?
No, I genuinely start with social conflict.
Okay.
And then the dragon in that example would be one of those carrot on sticks, the micro level stuff. At least
Wow.
at least the way I see it.
Okay. Well, now I want to understand that. You have the dragon seed, and which would be like the
Yeah.
BBEG, and then you have the social conflicts. These are two different seeds. How do they look to you in your bag?
Well, I mean, they both have a home, right? They're kind of, you were just touching on it. I'm going to eventually get both of the seeds out, but I genuinely don't think of a big bad right off the get go. I'm still world. When I say world building, I'm still building out the world, and then I start building the uh, we'll say the not the social conflicts, but the other, I don't know, the other conflicts that that evolve from everything. Um, so in this case, yeah, it would be, here's the trouble they have in paradise, right? Here's the trouble they have in their city. something is happening, and as they are either forced out, leave out on their own, whatever they happen to do, yeah, now I've got other plot hooks that I guess that's what I would call them, is more plot hooks. Uh, but I have always been a firm believer. I mean, I don't want to change the topic into storytelling, because I think that's a topic for another time. But as far as, world building out, I tend to have different areas of intrigue that my players can reach to. Um, but I don't focus on those as much. I still have the overarching conflict, and then I mean, some people would say dragons have, more political power and however they want. But what I say to that is every world's different, and we make our own worlds, right?
Speaking of the differences, something that's become, I don't want to say more popular, but has definitely grown because of the OSR scene has also grown, and a lot more players, not just older players, but even newer players are getting into OSR style type of games. And theirs really encourages the one town. You build your one town. Don't worry about anything else. The world building is one town. And then have a couple little conflicts on the outside. That's it. Sit down. Now play your game. Next session, you can figure out what's outside that town. I think it's a very opposite way of I look at it, and very opposite, I think, what we've talked about today. What's the benefit, or is there a benefit starting with this one town?
To me, that sounds like pure madness and chaos just waiting to happen. But that's how I've done things, and I've literally never been a DM, so it's hard for me to judge.
Very fair. What about you, Knock?
I think solely focusing on one town and always bringing them back has a place. It's just not my place. I like more freedom. I like more freedom. I if I'm going through the trouble of creating this landscape, this country for them to explore, and to learn what I would call a rich history of, then I don't want them tied to one town. I say that, but I'm a huge fan of the quote fortress town in some games where players are developing their own town. So yeah, it is kind of like a headquarters or home base that they return to eventually. And I've always loved that idea. Uh, but if you're talking about like specifically like these adventures ran around a specific town, too small scale for me.
I I don't wholeheartedly would dive into the OSR style. I think it's trying to develop a very specific kind of game, which is fine. It's an OSR style, so of course it's trying to reinforce that. But recently, well, I guess recently, 5 years ago, recently in my GM history, I did run something for the first time, was a module. And the module was Ghosts of Saltmarsh. And that was all about a single town and lots of adventures. And that book does a horrendous job at tying anything together. So you, as the GM, have to figure out why any of this is in the book and why should the players care. But it was built on one town, lots of adventures and conflicts on the outside. And I will say that was kind of interesting to have a central town as for such an adventure, long adventure. We played, I think, went through that, took about a year or so to get through. And the one really interesting moment and idea behind it that I think is valuable, at least in this particular way, is the connection and investment the players get and their characters to everybody in town. Things start to matter more when you see the town develop, for the good or bad. Oh, refugees came in because of this. Well, I remember helping those people, and now they're here. Oh, that's too bad. But then they might be thanking you. Or, oh, that the baker died because you didn't solve this mystery fast enough, and he died too. Like, oh, that I remember that moment. Every time we go to the bakery, it's shut now, or you have to talk to the widow. Like, that's really an impactful thing, that this town becomes real and the history grows over the campaign. So even if you started there and the campaign lasts for years, if you just have it, I do see the value in growing out of it. I was forced into it because the module was terrible, but I definitely can understand the wisdom behind developing a central place, because you can get deeper connections to the NPCs and to what's going on and what's happening to them.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I don't for some of my world building and stuff like that, I have major metropolises and stuff like that that serve as anchor points, but not really a centralized town that follows the characters the players and the characters as they develop. That's a rather novel and new concept to me.
Uh, that's absolutely true. Well, we're about that time. What's your final thoughts on the seeds of world building?
So my final thoughts are, just for anyone listening, there is no wrong way to do it. And honestly, just have fun with it. You can pull inspiration from anything. Don't be shy about that. At the end of the day, only you are the one thinking about putting all these puzzle pieces into your own puzzle. Um, World building is absolutely fun, and you can lose yourself in it. But yeah, there's all three of us have a different way of doing it. There's no wrong way. Just have at it. Have fun with it.
I'm right there with Noct. There is no wrong way to start it. There's my way, there's his way, there's your way, but there isn't an objective right way to do it. Um, but I'm also right there with Noct. It is something you can lose yourself in uh, because it is so much fun. You are coming up with these rich histories and stuff like that. That if you're used to being the player, it's a whole new adventure for you. Even if you're used to being a GM, you might not necessarily uh, have built out a whole world like this before. I think anyone should try their hand at it at least once.
And on that, we're wrapping it up. Perfect ending. I'm GM Keegan. With me, as always, we got Nock and our special guest, a longtime player that's going to dip his toes in very shortly into the world of GMing, Ken. Thanks for joining us, and have a great night. Thank you, community, for listening. Join RollNet's Discord now to continue the discussion with other GMs, DMs, and players about tonight's topic. Come back next time, where there's always a seat waiting for you at a table in a tavern.